Okay, this section is about quantitative research, which means it deals with numbers. So let's get started, and I'll go ahead and share my screen. The first thing I think we should talk about is sampling and sample size. So often, when you're trying to conduct a big survey, you need to know who you're going to survey. It has to be a huge list of people who fit your profile, right? And often we end up paying the market research company and their vendor partner who handles all of the sample um, to conduct our survey for us. Now, if you're looking for a group of people who are very easy to find, then it gets cheaper. But if you're looking for a very specific group of people with very specific characteristics, then it starts to get expensive. So it is really important to understand who is your audience, why are they the right fit for your survey, and then go after that audience. So there are concepts like incidence rate, which basically means if you have a very easy to find sample, then it's going to be cheaper and we can do your survey in quickly and in a cheap way. But if you have a very specific audience, females who are in engineering, who work at the top 5 .com companies, right? And then you can add another variable. They have to be between the ages of 35 and 45. Oh, and then you could say, oh, and they're all immigrants, right? They can't be Americans. They have to be from other parts of the world. Now you're really narrowing down your sample. So those are some of the things that if you were to work in this field, you would need to be able, you should understand it. You have to do it. But I just want to keep it really simple and talk about probability sample and non-probability sample. In a probability sample, everyone has an equal chance of being selected for a survey. For example, it could be a computerized program that would select every ninth person from a list, right? And it's a general public with no parameters or any specific requests or variables. And that's a probability sample. A non-probability sample, also called a quota sample, is where individuals are chosen from a specific subgroup. So for example, my example for you here is I need 100 people who are between the age group of 30 and 40. That's it. It's still a pretty large sample, but it is a sample chosen from a subgroup. And that's what we call a quota sample. I've conducted surveys that are for 50 people, and they may not be as representative, but it sometimes, we just need some basic understanding. Most big companies have surveys with 1,000 people. It's a lot more complicated, and it requires special expertise to analyze some of that data. But in general, those are the size of groups that give you very good clarity on how to proceed. Okay, let's move on to some simple survey question construction. Here you are seeing that someone can answer multiple choice questions, and it's an exhaustive and mutually exclusive category. So for example, when I say exhaustive, I've basically covered everything. And when I say mutually exclusive, well, you see there's 2 to 4 and 5 to 8. So there isn't 2 to 4 and 4 to 8, because then it becomes not mutually exclusive, right? So that's what a survey questionnaire could look like, that you could pick one, or you could say pick more than one, right? You can decide how you'd like to construct that question. You can also do some scaled answers like Likert scale. I strongly agree versus I disagree. And there are lots of little things in between. If you're not sure, you can choose one of those, right? So these are just some of the things that you would see in a survey. This isn't a survey class. I'm not going to get into a lot of this stuff, but nowadays it's so easy with MailChimp, with SurveyMonkey, with Google surveys, Google Forms. It's so easy to just create surveys and share them, but constructing questions is an art and a science, and programming how to skip questions if they don't apply to you, to make sure that people are not stumped to say, I don't fit in here and I don't fit in there, I'm not really sure what to say. This is something that people are trained to do. And so if you're interested in this kind of area, uh, get deeper into it, learn how it's done, take a class or two to learn. Okay. So when we do surveys, there are different ways we can reach them, right? In the past, and maybe even sometimes now, infrequently, you get a questionnaire in the mail. Often maybe there's a census report, a report that comes out. We are supposed to complete it. It's mandatory, and then we mail them back out. And it's a very expensive proposition, but that is something that governments do. In general, unless they're paying you to do the questionnaire, you don't really do a mailed questionnaire, because honestly, it's too expensive to do anyway. Telephone surveys, I almost feel like a thing of the past now. Telephone surveys have been done over many, many years. I mean, people used to often call me, even I would think 10 years ago, 7, 8 years ago, people used to call and say, we have a survey, would you like to answer a few questions? And most times nowadays, the phone tells you this is a spam, don't pick it up. There's no way to get out of that spam list, honestly, as a surveyor. And so it's just been hard to survey people. Sometimes when you pay people handsomely, you might get something. Um, but if somebody is on the phone with you, most likely they will complete that survey for you on the phone. But it's hard to get people to just be there and spare that time and talk to you. The next few ways to do a survey is, one is called an omnibus or a piggyback survey. Now, this is an interesting way to conduct survey, and I have a really good example. So let's say you are a cereal company like Kellogg's, right? And you want to know who is the next best influencer that the teenagers are following. I mean, it could be somebody on TikTok, or just like a global celebrity, maybe somebody from like a girl group or a boy band, or just somebody famous that a lot of the kids, the teenagers, are following. And for you to understand that, sometimes you have to do a big survey, and big surveys cost a lot of money. Well, here's the solution. Somebody like a Magid, or another market research company like Millward Brown. Now, they would do really big surveys, and they would do an industry-wide survey where they'd be willing to put one or two questions that you want on that survey. So often these market research companies, they don't want to pay that kind of money to create their survey. Sometimes it costs a good 50,000 people, because they're trying to reach a very large crowd of people to get consensus. So what they do is ask some of these big companies like Kellogg for their cereal category and Best Buy for their tech category and Nike for their athletic category. They would just reach out to these guys and say, hey guys, we're doing a big survey. Would you have one or two questions that you would like us to add to the survey? We'll just keep it very general. We'll add other competitor names in there as well. But we will collate the results of our survey and your specific question, and we'll give it to you. And we're going to charge you $8,000 for it. So for a $50,000 survey, they may reach out to 4 or 5 different big names, and they would be able to recover the cost of that survey for the most part. And it's a great proposition for these brands because they don't have to pay that kind of money. This is a drop in the ocean for them, $8,000, and they find the person that they're looking for, or whatever information it is that they're looking for, that would help their brand. So that kind of survey is what we call an omnibus or a piggyback survey. It includes the client questions in the survey. It's cheaper than a full-fledged survey for that client. And, that is something that you tend to see in some of these big surveys, quick data points that are required to make PR decisions, marketing decisions, sales decisions, and whatever else. Okay. And then I'd like to talk about the cheaper surveys, right? These are the web surveys, email surveys, very, very cheap. A lot of brands would do it. What do you think about this stuff, right? Even polls. Nowadays, you've got polls. You can do polls on Instagram. You can do polls on Facebook. You can even do polls on WhatsApp. So these are very quick, excuse me, immediate response rates, but the disadvantage is that you don't always know the respondents. You don't know if somebody has responded twice. So it could be a little bit impersonal. Okay, and then finally, let's talk about emerging digital research tools. So the first kind of set of tools that I'd like to talk about deal with social media monitoring. It's really important to know what people are talking about, especially in terms of your brand. So what social media monitoring tools do is help you figure out what people are talking about. And they do it through this process called social listening. So listening tools are tools that actually in some ways follow your customers or potential consumers around on the web to help you gauge what is it that they like, what kind of music are they listening to, what kind of things are they buying, what kind of things are they talking about, what do their comments look like. That's the kind of stuff. What kind of content are they consuming? So it really helps with the sentiment analysis of your customers. What do they care about? Sometimes what social media monitoring tools do also is they tell you if somebody has commented on something. And if it is a negative comment, you could immediately respond back. Sorry, I'm so sorry you had such a bad experience. What can we do to fix it? Or thank you so much for this feedback. We'll make sure that the next time, we do this, that we take these other comments that you've just given us into account, right? So there is so much power in some of these social media monitoring tools because it's a great way for the PR team to keep tabs on unhappy customers too, right? For example, I lost my luggage when I was in India, when I went to India, and it didn't come to me until the day I was leaving to come back to the US. And even when I came back to the US, the luggage that was supposed to come came a week later. So I really was frustrated because I had to buy all these other clothes and it was just inconvenient, following up and things were just such a mess. Because there was an issue at the Heathrow airport at that point, and all the luggage was getting stuck there. Just, just a few years ago. Now, I was so mad. I had no idea when I was going to get my luggage and if I were even getting it. So I put a very angry note on LinkedIn. Sorry, not on LinkedIn, on Twitter. And they responded. They didn't respond any other way, but the PR team responded when I put a note on Twitter saying, and now X, right? It's called X. I put a note on X and people responded, I'm so sorry. Here's a number to call. I'd like to fix this problem right now. It's a great way to interact with unhappy customers. It's a great way to interact with happy customers. And in general, all of these monitoring tools are really great to monitor your competition. What are they doing? How are they tailoring their key messages? And what do we need to do now that we know that? Okay. You could look at some of the names that you see down here: Cloud, AirRocket, Social Mention, Radian6, iMotion, Tobii Eye Tracking. There's a lot of stuff out there that you can look at to understand the kind of work that is being done in the emerging digital space. There are even tools that, there are companies that call people into their space, and there is a camera, and you're wearing some glasses too, and they just ask you to look over some of the pages, and they're able to see where you spent most of your time. Where were you looking? And that's really interesting because it tells you, well, this is this yellow area. Well, it's telling me that you spent most of your time, like your eyes were looking over there. And that was an ad. So what was it about the ad that was so interesting? Or you read something and you just didn't look at something else. Well, why didn't you look at that? Right. And that's the kind of stuff they're able to monitor. And these are the kinds of tools that are out there now. Another term for you to remember is called the key performance indicators, which is the short form for it is KPI. And if you work in the industry, everyone just says KPI. Okay. KPIs basically are defined after business goals are defined. And it's a measurement term, right? So my customer engagement will be measured in terms of followers, or in terms of engagement, in terms of shares and reshares and retweets, right? That's the idea. Nowadays, we don't really care so much about followers because followers can be bought on social media. What we do care about is engagement. How much did somebody share your post? How many likes did you have? How many comments did you have? What was the quality of those comments? It's the engagement that we all care about. And that's why you see influencers in general, the importance of them is going slightly down. Micro influencers, which are influencers with smaller following, but a lot of engagement, is now getting bigger. And that's what a lot of the brands are going after. So, this is a key term, KPI, key performance indicators, that you should know. Okay. And then let's quickly talk about website analytics. So website analytics is basically just trying to understand how many people came to your site. Okay, and from where? Did they come from mobile? Did they come from desktop? Did they come from a Google search? Did they come from Facebook? Did they come from another different source that we need to know about? How much time did they spend on your site? How much time did they spend on a specific part of your site? If you wrote articles, if you have a blog, which articles did they spend most time on? Which countries were they coming from? What is the kind of topic that they seem like they're gravitating toward? How much time do they spend on your homepage before navigating to another page? These are the kinds of data points that really help us figure out why somebody chooses our site, our specific article, which section, which product are they spending most time on. These are really great data points. So website analytics is something that you could easily do at the back end of your website. And Google Analytics is actually free, so you can really pick on anything you want to and slice and dice that information once your website is connected to the analytics platform. So it's an important skill. More and more people ask for data points, more and more employers, and you can get a lot of these certifications. You can find them on LinkedIn, you can look them up online on Google. You can do these certifications. Many of them are free, but it's a great thing to put on your resume. And honestly, it's a great thing to know how your client is doing, and it's very easy to pick it up. Okay, so that's what ends the research section of this class. We've talked about across different videos and different sections. We've talked about qualitative research, quantitative research, and we've broken each one of them down. I hope it was fun.